My name is Sophia. I am 26 years old. I live in Reno, Nevada. I work as a warehouse operations supervisor, logging 60 hours a week to keep a household afloat that should have never been my responsibility. I never imagined that a cheap plastic pregnancy test would become the blade that finally severed my bond with my family. But that was exactly what happened the moment my sister looked me in the eye and smiled. I stood frozen in the middle of our living room, my steel toe boots still on, my back screaming after another double shift at the warehouse. Around me were towers of dirty laundry, half-empty soda bottles, and toys scattered like landmines across the floor. Jada leaned against the couch, rubbing her stomach with a smug, practiced motion, as if she were proud of the destruction she was about to announce. "I am pregnant," she said calmly. "Sixth time. No job. No savings. No plan." My stomach twisted, not with joy but with dread. Because I already knew what that sentence meant. I knew exactly who would be expected to pay for this baby, just like the other five. Derek was sprawled on the couch behind her, controller in hand, eyes glued to the television. He did not look up. He never did. He had not worked in over 3 years, yet somehow always found energy to criticize the food I cooked and the money I spent. The house smelled like stale beer and unwashed dishes, and suddenly I felt like I could not breathe. I had just finished a 60-hour work week. I had missed 2 nights of class. I had paid the electric bill. I had bought groceries. I had covered daycare. Again, and now they wanted more. Something inside me snapped, quietly, permanently. "I am done," I said. My voice shook, but I did not raise it. "I will not pay for this baby. Not $1. The room went silent for exactly half a second. Then Jada exploded. She screamed that I was selfish, ungrateful, heartless. She told me I owed her because family takes care of family. She threatened to throw me out onto the street if I did not comply. Derek finally looked up from the television just long enough to smirk, as if daring me to challenge them. That was the moment I understood the truth I had been avoiding for 3 years. I was not their sister. I was not their aunt. I was not family. I was their wallet, their nanny, their shield against consequences. And I was done sacrificing my future so they could keep destroying theirs. If you have ever felt like you were carrying the weight of an entire household on your back, while everyone around you took and took without shame, then you will understand why what I did next was not cruelty. It was survival. And it started a chain of events that ended with police at my door, child protective services in my sister's living room, and my family finally learning the price of treating the wrong person as disposable. At 4 in the morning, my alarm went off before the sky over Reno even thought about turning blue. I lay there for 3 seconds, staring at the cracked ceiling above my bed, calculating everything that would collapse if I stayed still. 5 lunches would not get packed. 2 toddlers would miss daycare. The older kids would miss the bus. And Jada and Derek would sleep straight through it all, untouched by consequences. So I got up. The kitchen lights flickered when I turned them on, a quiet warning I pretended not to see. I stepped over a sticky patch of dried soda on the floor and opened the refrigerator. Half a gallon of expired milk, ketchup, mustard, 1 limp head of lettuce. I sighed and reached for the bread, already mentally rearranging my budget. By the time the water started boiling, I was already behind. I packed lunch boxes like a machine. Peanut butter sandwiches cut in halves, cheap apple slices, 1 granola bar each, even though they always wanted 2. I checked homework while tying shoelaces. I braided Sophie's hair with one hand while Caleb complained that his math problem did not make sense. Justin hovered nearby, silently gathering backpacks, his shoulders slumped like someone twice his age. The hallway door to the master bedroom stayed closed. Locked! Leo was crying in his crib, his voice hoarse and desperate. I picked him up, rocked him against my chest, and felt resentment settle into my bones when I realized his parents were still asleep behind that door, insulated from their own child. When I finally dropped the older kids at the bus stop and the younger ones at daycare, my hands were shaking from caffeine and exhaustion. I glanced at the clock and cursed under my breath. I was already cutting it close for work. The warehouse was loud and unforgiving, but it was simple. Boxes did not manipulate you. Conveyor belts did not guilt you. Physical labor hurt, but it made sense. Unlike home. During my lunch break, my phone vibrated with a notification that made my stomach drop. A final warning from the utility company. I drove home in a panic, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. The bright red shutoff notice was taped to our front door like a public accusation. 3 months overdue. I stood there shaking, rage crawling up my spine because I had given Jada $600 the week before. Cash. I had looked her in the eye and told her exactly what it was for. Inside, the kitchen trash overflowed. As I pushed it down, a crumpled receipt caught my eye. Designer maternity clothes, every dollar accounted for. Not a cent paid toward keeping the lights on. I transferred the money from my savings without sitting down. That fund had been earmarked for my next semester of tuition. I stared at the confirmation screen, numb as the balance dropped to almost nothing. I did not cry. I did not scream. I went back to work. The call from the high school came just before my shift ended. Megan had skipped class. Got into an argument with a teacher. I clocked out early, losing hours I could not afford, and drove straight to the principal's office because Jada did not answer her phone. Megan sat beside me, eyes red, fingers twisting in her sleeves. "She does not see us anymore," she whispered. "She only talks about the baby." I promised her I would figure something out. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue. That evening, I walked into the house to find Derek watching sports while the kids complained they were hungry. I went straight to the stove and boiled water for pasta because it was cheap and fast. Jada emerged from the bedroom wearing her new clothes and frowned at the mess. Derek took one bite and pushed his plate away. "This is bland," he said. "Why did you not make steak?" "I wanted red meat." I stared at him, at the audacity of a grown man demanding luxury while sitting in a house he did not pay for. Powered by electricity I had almost lost. 3 days later, Grandma Lorraine arrived. She did not come to help. She came to judge. She sat beside Jada on the couch, purse clutched to her chest, and looked at me like I was a disappointing child. Derek lingered in the doorway, arms crossed. "We need a solution," Grandma Lorraine said. "A bigger car. You should sell yours." "My sedan. My lifeline. My way to work. My escape." I tried to explain. "I needed that car to keep my job. To finish my degree." She shook her head, unimpressed. "You are being selfish," she said. "Your sister is carrying life, and you care more about pennies in that old car." Something hardened inside me. "That is my property," I said. "I will not sell my future anymore." The room went cold. Grandma Lorraine left in a fury, muttering about ingratitude. Later that night, I went to my room and checked my bank account, just to make sure I could still afford gas. That was when I saw the email, a hard inquiry on my social security number. Unauthorized. My chest tightened as I logged in. A new credit card. Maxed out. High-end baby furniture. Jada had crossed a line she could not step back from. And in that moment, I realized this was no longer just family dysfunction. It was a crime. I grabbed my keys and drove into the night, knowing that once I said the next words out loud, there would be no turning back. I did not go home after discovering the fraudulent credit card. I drove until the familiar streets of Reno blurred into something anonymous, something that did not know my name or my obligations. I pulled into a small coffee shop on the edge of town, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and burnt espresso that tasted like survival. My hands were shaking when I printed the bank statement from my phone and slammed it onto the table. Tessa was already there. She looked up the moment she saw my face and did not ask questions. She did not need to. She slid the papers toward herself, her eyes scanning every line with clinical precision. Tessa worked as a paralegal, and the calm way she processed disaster was the first thing that slowed my breathing all day. "This is identity theft," she said flatly. "Not family drama, a felony." The word hit me harder than any insult Jada had ever thrown. Felony, crime, federal. Tessa walked me through every step like she was defusing a bomb. We froze my credit. We filed fraud reports. We documented dates, amounts, merchants. She told me to stop paying for anything that was not directly tied to my name. "If you keep saving them," she warned, "they will keep stealing from you. Next time they might not stop at furniture." I drove home that night knowing the house was no longer just toxic. It was dangerous. When I walked through the front door, Jada was standing in the kitchen, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her transaction had just been declined. She looked at me like an animal sensing a shift in dominance. "What did you do?" she demanded. I walked past her without answering. For the first time in 3 years, I did not explain myself. I did not justify my exhaustion. I did not soften my boundaries to keep the peace. I locked my bedroom door and sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the muffled sounds of chaos outside. The silence between us lasted a week. It was thick, hostile, calculated. I moved differently during those days. I cooked only for myself. I paid only my share. I kept my documents hidden. I backed up everything. Jada watched me like a hawk, waiting for me to break. Then the envelope arrived. I rushed home from the warehouse not to start cooking, but to intercept the mail. My heart hammered as I pulled a thick white envelope from the box, its logo unmistakable. A major technology firm in downtown Reno. I tore it open right there in the driveway. Paid internship. Systems analysis. More than double my warehouse salary. A pathway to a full-time engineering role. For the first time in years, I smiled without forcing it. That was my mistake. The moment I stepped inside, Jada pounced. She snatched the paper from my hand before I could react. Her eyes scanned it rapidly, jealousy warping her face into something unrecognizable. She tore it cleanly in half. Then again, the pieces fluttered to the dirty linoleum floor like confetti at a funeral. "You are not going anywhere," she said coldly. "You are dropping out of school. You are quitting your job. We need you here." Derek leaned back in his chair, sipping soda like this was entertainment. "A woman belongs in the home," he said with a smirk, not pretending to be some office genius. I bent down and picked up the scraps of my future, smoothing them with shaking hands. Jada stepped closer, invading my space, daring me to submit. "If you walk out that door," she screamed, "do not ever come back. You owe me this house. You owe me everything." I stood up slowly. "You are right," I said evenly. "I will go, and you will soon understand the price of turning the only person helping you into an enemy." That night I did not pack. I waited. I knew they were listening, waiting for zippers, boxes, signs of defiance. I waited until the house settled into a false calm, until the sound of Derek's snoring vibrated through the walls. I slipped into the garage under the excuse of checking the laundry. That was when I saw Justin. He stepped out from behind a stack of old tires, his face pale, his eyes far too old for 16. Without a word, he pressed a battered notebook into my hands. Dates, times, conversations, plans to report my car stolen, plans to sabotage my credit. Plans discussed between Jada and Grandma Lorraine while they thought no one was listening. "You have to leave tonight," he whispered. "They are serious." I looked at him and understood something with devastating clarity. If I stayed, I would disappear. If I left, I might survive long enough to come back for him. At midnight, while the house slept, I initiated my exit. Not with suitcases, with trash bags. As I stepped into the cold Nevada night, I had no idea that my sister would call the police within 48 hours and accuse me of crimes I did not commit. But she was about to learn that I had stopped playing defense. Freedom lasted less than 48 hours. The studio apartment Tessa found for me sat above a laundromat on the far side of Reno. The walls were thin. The air smelled faintly of detergent and old cigarettes. The mattress lay directly on the floor. To anyone else, it would have looked like rock bottom. To me, it felt like oxygen. I slept for 12 straight hours. No crying. No demands, no locked doors. When I woke up, sunlight spilled across the bare floor, and for the first time in years, my body did not feel like it was bracing for impact. Then my phone started vibrating. Not ringing. Vibrating. Again. And again. 99 missed calls. Hundreds of messages. Jada's name filled the screen like an infection. Confusion turned into apologies. Apologies mutated into rage. I listened to the last voicemail. "You ungrateful brat," she screamed. "I will call the police. I will tell them you stole my money. You will pay for abandoning this family." I saved the voicemail. Then I blocked her number. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 2 nights later, red and blue lights flooded my apartment through the blinds like a violent sunrise. The pounding on my door rattled the frame hard enough to shake paint loose from the ceiling. "Police!" My heart slammed against my ribs as I looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed officers stood in the hallway, hands near their holsters. Behind them stood Jada, her face twisted into an expression of theatrical grief, eyes already wet with practiced tears. I opened the door slowly, my hands visible. The older officer stepped forward. His tone was stern, rehearsed. "Ms. Sophia," he said, "we received a report of stolen assets valued at $10,000 and a welfare concern involving minors." Before I could speak, Jada lunged forward, sobbing. "She robbed me," she cried. "She took the money I saved for my children. She stole Grandma Lorraine's diamond jewelry before she ran away." The neighbors were watching now. Doors cracked open, eyes hungry for spectacle. I stepped aside. "Please," I said calmly. "Search the apartment." The room was nearly empty. Mattress, trash bags, my laptop, documents. No jewelry, no cash, no signs of theft. The officers searched anyway. Jada watched with a smug smile, convinced this was her victory lap. Then a breathless voice echoed down the hallway. "Wait, Justin." He stood there shaking, his hoodie damp with sweat, his phone clutched in his hand like a weapon. He walked straight past his mother without looking at her. "She is lying," he said, his voice steady despite his trembling hands. "Here is the video." The officer took the phone. The footage played silently, then with sound. Jada, laughing, wrapping a velvet jewelry box in a towel, shoving it under her mattress. "I will ruin her," she said on the video. "She thinks she can leave." The room went dead quiet. The younger officer stopped searching. The lead officer's posture changed completely as he handed the phone back to Justin and turned to Jada. "Ma'am," he said coldly, "filing a false police report is a criminal offense." Jada tried to back away, screaming that Justin was a traitor. The officer stepped between them. I did not smile. I did not need to. 2 months later, Child Protective Services knocked on her door. Without my income, without my labor, without my silence, the house collapsed fast. Mold crept across the walls. The refrigerator sat empty. The electricity was cut again. The caseworker documented everything. Derek left the same night the investigation became real. He took whatever cash he could find and disappeared without a word. At the emergency hearing, the judge did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The children were removed. All of them. Jada was sentenced to community service and fined for filing a false police report. Her screaming in the courtroom echoed in my ears long after I left. She found me once more, 6 months later, in the lobby of my corporate office in Las Vegas. She dropped to her knees in front of security guards and strangers, grabbing the hem of my skirt, begging me to pay her rent so she could get the kids back. I stepped away. "I raised them for 3 years," I said quietly. "You never did." Security escorted her out. I did not look back. 6 months later, I stood on the top floor of an office building in Las Vegas, watching the neon lights flicker to life against the darkening desert sky. The silence around me was no longer frightening. It was intentional, earned. My internship had ended with a full-time offer, junior systems analyst, a salary that surpassed what Jada and Derek had earned combined over several years. Benefits, stability, respect. I lived in a modern apartment 10 minutes from the Strip, where the electricity never shut off and the only mess waiting for me at the end of the day was my own. I cleaned my space when I wanted to. I slept when I needed to. I breathed. News from Reno reached me slowly, filtered through distant relatives who finally understood why I had left. Grandma Lorraine suffered a mild stroke shortly after the court hearings. Without my income to cover her medications and without Jada willing or able to care for her, she was moved into a state-funded nursing facility on the outskirts of town. It was understaffed, clinical, quiet in the wrong way. She tried to call me. Over and over, I did not answer. My focus stayed where it belonged, on the children. I met with a financial advisor and established a protected educational trust for Justin and his siblings. The funds were locked by legal design. They would activate only when each child turned 18. No loopholes, no access for Jada, no exceptions. Justin was placed with a foster family that encouraged his academic drive instead of exploiting it. We exchanged emails weekly. He told me about school, about finally sleeping through the night. I told him his future was secure as long as he stayed focused. That was my promise. As for Jada, reality settled in slowly and without mercy. She worked night shifts at a 24-hour laundromat in a rough part of town, folding strangers' clothes under flickering fluorescent lights to pay off her fines and community service hours. The woman who once demanded steak dinners now scrubbed lint traps and counted quarters. She looked older, thinner, bitter. I did not feel joy at her suffering, only clarity. I caught my reflection in the glass of the conference room door one evening and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. She was not exhausted, not afraid, not bracing for the next demand. She stood straight. I had reclaimed my name, my credit, my future. Walking away did not make me heartless. It made me free. Shared DNA was never a contract to endure abuse. Love that requires self-destruction is not love. It is control. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is leave, build something better, and refuse to be dragged back into the fire by people who never intended to change. I stepped into the meeting room where my colleagues waited, people who valued my work and respected my boundaries. The doors closed behind me, and for the first time in my life, I did not look back.